Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the New Zealand Franchising Podcast. My name is Callum Floyd. In our first episode, we looked at the breadth, scale and importance of franchising in New Zealand. Today, I'd like to answer a much more fundamental question. What is franchising? As we mentioned in the last episode, it's a term that most of us recognise. We see franchise businesses almost every day. We buy coffee from them. We have our cars serviced by them. We visit them for education, fitness, trades, healthcare and professional services. But what actually makes a business a franchise? How does a franchise work? And why has it become one of the world's most widespread and successful business growth models? Let's start with a story. When many people think about franchising, they immediately think of McDonald's. Recently, I visited Downey, California, home to the oldest surviving McDonald's restaurant. This was actually McDonald's restaurant number 3, one of the very first restaurants built and still standing today in much the same form as it did in the 1950s. Standing there, it's difficult to imagine that this restaurant would one day become part of one of the world's biggest and most recognised business systems. Just this week, I took this photograph of one of New Zealand's and indeed the world's newest McDonald's restaurants, only a few minutes from my office in Auckland. More than 70 years separate these two restaurants, yet today McDonald's operates more than 40,000 restaurants in over 100 countries. So how did that happen? How do you take one successful restaurant and replicate it thousands of times across different countries, cultures and generations while still delivering a recognisable customer experience? The answer isn't just great food. It's a business model that can be shared, taught, supported and replicated. And that's really what franchising is all about. It's about taking a successful business and creating the systems, processes and support that allow it to be successfully replicated by other business owners. So what actually is franchising? At its simplest, franchising is a business growth model. Rather than opening and operating every location itself, a business owner, known as the franchisor, allows independent business owners, known as franchisees, to establish and operate businesses using an established brand and business system. Every franchise relationship begins with these two parties. On one side is the franchisor, on the other is the franchisee. And although they work closely together, they're separate businesses with different roles and responsibilities. Connecting them is the franchise agreement, and this establishes the legal relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee. It sets out the rights and obligations of each party and provides the framework within which the franchise business will operate. Supporting the franchise agreement are the franchise manuals, and these are equally important because they document how the business is intended to operate in practice. They explain the systems, the standards, the procedures that help create consistency across the franchise network. The franchisor is responsible for developing and continually improving the business system, and that typically includes the brand, intellectual property, business systems, technology, training, and ongoing support. And the franchisor has usually invested years developing these assets before offering franchises to others. The franchisee then invests in establishing and operating their own business, and they provide the investment, employ and manage staff, build relationships with local customers, and operate the business on a day-to-day basis. And while they operate under a common brand, the franchisee is normally an independent business owner. And as we talk about in future episodes, some franchisees will own and control multiple franchises themselves. In return for the right to use the brand and the business system, the franchisee will typically pay an initial franchise fee, ongoing royalties, and in many franchise systems contribute to a marketing fund. And these payments help fund the ongoing development, support, and promotion of the franchise system. So while every franchise system is different, this simple framework sits at the heart of modern franchising. Two independent businesses connected by a legal agreement, supported by documented systems, working together to build successful businesses under a shared brand. Of course, many people ask why someone would choose to buy a franchise rather than simply starting their own business. And in short, one of the attractions is that the franchisee isn't starting with a blank sheet of paper. They are investing in an established brand, proven products and services, systems, training, and ongoing support that have already been developed. And we'll explore that in much more detail in a future episode. Now that we've looked at the basic franchisor-franchisee relationship, it's important to understand something else, and that is not all franchise systems are the same. In fact, one of the biggest misconceptions about franchising is that every franchise operates in roughly the same way, and nothing could be further from the truth. Let's take these two hypothetical franchise systems. To a customer, they may appear almost identical. Both might sell similar products, both might have attractive branding, both might be well-known businesses, yet behind the scenes they could be structured very differently. Franchise system A may provide extensive training, regular business coaching, comprehensive operating systems, and a high level of ongoing support. And to fund that additional support, it may charge a higher ongoing royalty and operate with smaller, more closely managed territories. Franchise system B, on the other hand, may be designed to give franchisees greater autonomy. It may charge a lower royalty, provide larger territories, and expect franchisees to operate more independently. Neither approach is necessarily better, although it is true that a more highly specified system will likely have a more consistent customer experience. And one of the things I've learned over many years working with franchise systems is that there isn't a single perfect franchise model relevant to all situations. The best franchise model is optimized to reflect the objectives of the business, the industry that it's in, and the environment in which it operates. Fast food franchise may require a very different model from a home services business. A retail business may require a different support, different technology, and different economics from a professional services franchise. Even two businesses operating in exactly the same industry may choose very different franchise models. And the important thing isn't that every franchise looks the same. The important thing is that the franchise model has been thoughtfully designed to support the business, its franchisees, and its long-term objectives. One of the themes you'll hear me come back to throughout this podcast is that franchising is a business relationship. It's easier to think of franchising simply as a legal agreement or a commercial arrangement, but the best franchise systems are much more than that. They are long-term business relationships. The franchisor and the franchisee each have different roles, different responsibilities, and different investments, but ultimately they're working towards the same objective: building successful businesses under a shared brand and business system. And that means the success of one depends heavily on the success of the other. And a franchisor can't build a strong franchise system if its franchisees aren't successful. And equally, franchisees rely on the leadership, systems, innovation, and support provided by the franchisor. In many respects, franchising is one of the most interdependent business relationships that you can find. Over the years, I've also come to believe that alignment is incredibly important, and when franchisors and franchisees are aligned around the same objectives, the relationship becomes much stronger. They make better decisions, they communicate more openly, they're more willing to invest in the future, and ultimately, they create stronger businesses. And of course, that doesn't mean that they always agree. Like any long-term business relationship, there will sometimes be different perspectives and different priorities. But the strongest franchise systems are usually those where both parties recognize that they're working towards the same long-term goal. Because at its heart, franchising isn't about one side winning at the expense of the other. It's about creating a business relationship in which both parties can succeed together. And in great franchise systems, franchisees may never sell, and in fact, look for their children to take over the business. Now, after everything we've discussed, it's important to make one final point. Franchising can be an incredibly powerful business model, but it isn't a guarantee of success. Not all franchise systems are created equally. Some are exceptionally well designed, commercially sustainable, and supported. Others are less mature, less developed, or simply not as well suited to their markets. Likewise, not every franchisee is the right fit for every franchise system. Success depends on many factors: the quality of the franchise system, the capability and commitment of the franchisee, good leadership, sound business decisions, and sometimes factors such as selecting the right location or responding to changing market conditions. Even an outstanding franchise system can't guarantee success if the franchisee isn't well suited to the business or a poor site is selected. And equally, even an excellent franchisee can struggle if the franchise system itself has fundamental weaknesses. Like any business, franchising involves risk. It requires hard work, commitment, and good decision making from both the franchisor and the franchisee. And the strongest franchise system aren't those that never experience challenges. They're the ones that continually adapt, work constructively through these challenges, and remain focused on long-term success. For me, that's what responsible franchising is really about. Building strong franchise systems, selecting capable franchisees, leading and supporting franchisees, and creating business relationships that generate long-term value for everyone involved. So let's finish with 5 key takeaways from today's episode. First, franchising is a business growth model that enables successful businesses to be replicated by independent business owners. Second, every franchise relationship is built around the franchisor, the franchisee, the franchise agreement, and the franchise system. Third, not all franchise systems are the same. The best franchise model depends on the objectives of the business, the industry it's in, and the environment in which it operates. Even two otherwise identical franchises within the same sector could have a different structure, and potentially for good reason. Fourth, franchising is much more than a legal agreement. It's a long-term business relationship built on alignment, trust, and shared objectives. And finally, while franchising can be an incredibly powerful business model, it isn't a guarantee of success. Success depends on the quality of the franchise system, the capability of the franchisee, and the commitment of both parties to building a successful brand and set of businesses together. In our next episode, we'll explore another important question. Why do businesses choose franchising as a growth strategy? After all, if a business is successful, why not simply open more company-owned locations? What are the advantages of franchising? What are the challenges? And when is franchising the right strategy? And when isn't it? We'll explore those questions in episode 3. Thank you for joining me for episode 2 of the New Zealand Franchising Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. If you have, please consider following the podcast and sharing it with others who have an interest in franchising. Until next time, I'm Callum Floyd. Thanks for listening.